Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, Dave and I will be setting expectations for the Buffalo Bills offense in 2024. Josh Allen's MVP odds, the running back rotation, and target share for the receivers. We break down all of that and more. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. And we are into the month of June, and it is sort of the dog days of summer. We are still ways away from NFL football, Dave. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been consoling myself with the UFL. And hey, former Bills head coach Wade Phillips, former Bills wide receiver Marquez Stevenson, I'm sure a few others that I'm forgetting, will be making their appearance in the UFL championship next Sunday. So we got that to look forward to.
Yeah, this is where you really get to see how much of a degenerate we really are when it comes to football. Will we be betting on these games? Well, maybe that'll be the ultimate story. But yeah, we're in June. Obviously, we wrapped last show thinking, okay, June 1st comes, we're gonna maybe clear that cap space for the Trey White move. Obviously, a lot of that's gonna go to signing the draft picks, which I think a lot of people probably didn't take into account, but there's still potential moves that could be made here in the dog days of summer. And yeah, we're probably just about now a little over a month or so, a month plus from training camp at this point.
We got John Roberts coming in saying, who would you put on the wall now? It's been 7 years. I think the top two candidates got to be at this point, Eric Moulds and Kyle Williams. Kyle Williams' birthday today, by the way. I saw the Buffalo Bills posted that. So happy birthday to Kyle Williams. But I think it would have to be one of those two guys before we get into our show topic tonight.
If I'm going to power rank three guys to go on the wall, it would probably be Moulds first, and then you could make a case for Aaron Schobel as well, I think, to be on the wall. One of the most underrated players the Bills really ever had, probably, especially during the drought era and in the NFL during that time. So, and then Kyle Williams, I think, would be. So if you want to kind of go in like chronological order of when they played, you'd probably go Moulds, then Schobel, then Williams.
It was such a weird time because we never made the playoffs. There were some guys who were good statistically, but outside some guys like Kyle, Jerry, like Lee Evans, not a lot of guys stuck around for that long of a time. So it was just such a weird time period. But yeah, hopefully a couple of these guys over the next couple of years. Ruben Brown is a good one from Roy Collins.
Yeah, he would be first then probably.
I have my issues with Terry Pegula and the way he engages fans, and I don't know. The Bills have dropped the balls with their jerseys, I think, over the past couple of years. They've dropped the ball in terms of not putting people on the Wall of Fame. Maybe they're waiting for the new stadium. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. You're just moving the placard from one stadium to another. I don't really get the big deal, but yeah, that should be something that the Buffalo Bills consider here for the 2024 season. Speaking of the 2024 season, that is our topic for this evening. We're going to be setting our expectations for the Buffalo Bills offense. I want to start with some general offensive talk because there have been a couple of updates from OTAs that I thought have been, pretty important. And one of those things is through 3 weeks of OTAs, the reviews of this new Buffalo Bills offense has really not been positive. I've read reports of a lot of pre-snap penalties. There was at one point McDermott yanked the starters off of the field because of the number of pre-snap penalties they were taking. There's reports of the defense winning a lot of the reps early on at OTAs. But this sort of comes with the territory of having so many new faces, possibly a new philosophy and a new identity. So it's going to take time for the offense to learn, adapt, gel, and grow. These struggles in OTA, because things aren't running smoothly like they have in years previous, this is maybe a sign that we should expect some significant changes for the Bills offense in 2024.
Yeah, I do expect a significant change, at least in this from the standpoint of what we're going to talk about tonight with target shares and things like that. Like I I envision this being sort of a if you kind of liken it to when Leslie Frazier was a defensive
Mhm.
coordinator, right? And it was like kind of a 111th, like every guy was in their place doing what they needed to do to make the unit kind of work cohesively. I kind of see that maybe becoming a little bit of the identity offense this year, whereas like it's not necessarily like the one guy getting 160 targets like Stefon Diggs did in the past several seasons. I think it is going to be is like every person's going to kind of have their job and be expected to do it well. And for this thing to ideally be a well-oiled machine for Joe Brady as far as like using all of the different sort of tools he has in the toolkit with skill sets and experience and talent, obviously, and figuring out how to make this thing work. But it's going to come with some growing pains. First full year for him, maybe wanting to do some of his own things, put in some of his own things
Mhm.
away from the Ken Dorsey playbook from a year ago, and a ton of new faces, right? This offense has gone through a lot of changes at the skill position, notably at wide receiver. So I expect this to be a little bit of a growing pains early on.
Josh Allen took the mic. He made some interesting comments. He talked about being quicker with his eyes, more disciplined under Joe Brady. This may be in 2024, we see the next evolution of Josh Allen, a guy who maybe will start to take some of that underneath stuff, maybe connects a little bit more consistently on the deep ball like he has in years previous, a more of a make the trains run on time type of quarterback. Mahomes sort of mastered this when Tyreek Hill left the Kansas City Chiefs. But at the end of the day, he's got to do all of this without losing his identity and what makes him special. And that is running the football when he needs to run the football. And like I said, getting a little bit more consistent and getting back to hitting those deep balls. But taking those underneath stuff, making quicker reads, dumping the ball off, hitting the underneath stuff, as I just said, all of that I think comes with the territory to help his legs
Hmm.
be even more prolific, to start reconnecting with the deep ball. It's an important aspect of the game that I think this year Josh Allen is really working to master.
Yeah, and last year we know it was really not there for the Bills. It was very sparse compared to years past with the likes of Gabe Davis and even Emmanuel
Mhm.
Sanders at points. Stefon Diggs, like guys that aren't known for the deep ball, they had their they had their chances in years past. Like some of the ones that come to mind from last year were like in that Miami game to Diggs, where like Allen kind of just like threw it down there for like those are the kinds of ones we had last year. It didn't feel as if it did the prior
Mhm.
year. So we'll see if he can get that back on track. But yeah, I mean, efficiency, I think, is the name of the game. And we've seen Josh Allen at times when he's kind of had that mindset, he's almost unstoppable. So you can't take away what makes him great, obviously. And so it'll be interesting to see kind of how this sort of offense by
Mhm.
committee, so to speak, when it comes to the skill position players sort of blends with Josh Allen's sort of, I guess, X factor that he has in him and when to kind of take the chances and when to use his legs. It's going to be very interesting.
Mhm. We got Bills Mafia 056 coming in saying, very interested to see how the screen game looks under Joe Brady, especially with the personnel they acquired in the offseason. So that's a new wrinkle that quite possibly the Buffalo Bills offense could have. You have Jason M coming in saying, I actually think the growing pains will be weeks 5 and 6 when defenses adjust. I think we'll have enough unique things to put defenses on their heels for a while. The challenge has always been after that. And I think he's right. Like they're going to go through these struggles now during install. They're going to go through some struggles in training camp. Hopefully, they hit their stride by week 1. They can take advantage of this maybe new identity, taking some people by surprise, and then by weeks 5 and 6, hopefully they have the personnel and they have the people there. And Joe Brady is qualified enough and talented enough to adjust this offense to get us through a full season and for us to do what we need to do. So that's a really good comment there from Jason M. And then we have a super chat here from Justin Tyndall. He says, expect Josh to be better. He can make the right play and give to the open guy and not have to force feed Diggs. I think that's going to be really interesting. You mentioned the 111th comment, not having to force feed Stefon Diggs the ball could make this offense just look significantly different. And you're going to see a different type of Josh Allen on third down, on first down. Some of these plays and some of these areas where he just locks in on Stefon Diggs, he no longer has to do that.
Right. And I mean, look, Stefon Diggs was still getting his, fair share of targets towards the end of last season, but the efficiency and the production coming from those targets weren't what we had come to see from Stefon Diggs in his tenure as a Bills player. And for a lot of players, the stats he was putting up would be pretty good, right? Even though they were a bit subdued by his standards, for our standards that we had for him and he had for himself, they weren't up to par there at the end of the season. So there was a glimmer of maybe what things would look like without a Diggs if you take it from the stance of he wasn't sort of that alpha guy taking over games at the end of last season. And maybe that will become a blessing in disguise as we head into this year, as the Bills kind of see that they were still able to score points and win games without that. Not to mention they now have some new faces that ideally will maybe not day one result in a overall better wide receiver, production. But I do think top to bottom, the depth of this wide receiver room this year might be deeper than what they've had in years past, even though at the top, we don't have that, certified alpha guy yet, right? That we have had in years past.
Before we get to our predictions for the 2024 season, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And we can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, let's start our predictions this evening with Josh Allen. There's a number of things about Josh Allen in the 2024 season I want to get to. The first is that Josh Allen has an NFL record 4 consecutive seasons with 40 plus touchdowns. I think the next closest person to him is Drew Brees with 2 consecutive seasons. So Josh not only holds that record, he holds it by a wide margin. Are we going to see a 5th season in 2024, a 5th consecutive season where Josh Allen surpasses the 40 touchdown total? What are your thoughts?
Man, this is hard for me, right? Because last season was obviously buoyed by the 15 rushing TDs that he had and only the 29 passing. But, in the seasons prior to that, 35 passing TDs, 36, 37. And then obviously was able to kind of in the high single digits get over that 40 mark with the rushing TDs. I expect there to be a regression for sure on the rushing TD mark. On the passing TD mark, I don't know that he's going to get significantly higher than 30 passing TDs. 29 a year ago, new faces like we've mentioned in the receiver room. Maybe again, kind of re-emphasizing the running game like they did at times with James Cook last year. I'm going to go under 40 for this year, but it's going to be close. I think he's going to be in the high 30s, but I'm going to begrudgingly say he will be under 40 touchdowns this year.
It's interesting, right? Because you mentioned re-emphasizing the run game. Last year, they only had really James Cook, and then they kind of sort of liked Ty Johnson, but he was dinged up towards the end. Latavius Murray sort of showed his wear and tear. Leonard Fournette was Leonard Fournette. Now that Ray Davis is in the fold, do we see even more of an emphasis, a focal point on getting the ball to the running backs, and Josh Allen's rushing statistics sort of lowered because of that? But that being said, even if not, right, 18 touchdowns in 7 regular season games is what Josh Allen had under Joe Brady. From the New York Jets game through the end of the regular season, he had 10 passing and 8 rushing touchdowns. That is just over 2.5 per game. If you extrapolate that over a 17-game season, what Josh Allen did under Joe Brady, not Ken Dorsey, but Joe Brady, that would equate to 44 touchdowns. So I'm actually feeling pretty confident that Josh Allen will surpass 40 again, especially since Stefon Diggs was a non-factor in the second half of the season. So it's not exactly like Josh Allen was dependent on Stefon Diggs to get those 18 touchdowns. He was doing it really without him. So I'm pretty confident that Josh Allen can once again, because he's just the focal point of this offense. And I don't think any offense in the NFL is so dependent on their quarterback as the Buffalo Bills are. I think that he will once again surpass that 40 mark.
All right. I love the confidence.
Last year, Josh Allen had 579 pass attempts. What do we expect that number to be in 2024? 579 was up from 576 in 2022, but it was down from 646 in 2021. So where do we expect Josh Allen to land in terms of passing attempts in 2024?
Yeah, and even if you go back to 2020, 572, then he had the huge increase, 646 in 2021, then 567, 579. And last year per PFR, they have 400 or 545 of those as like actual passes, which were like targetable to receivers. So I think he's going to be right around that 550 to 575 range again this year. I mean, if you talk about 3 of the past 4 years, that's kind of right where he's landed. I do think that 646 in 2021 was a bit of an anomaly. And so I think I'm comfortable predicting him to kind of land in that 550 to 575 range again this year.
Roy Collins comes in and says 515. That's a pretty low number in my opinion. That would mean the Buffalo Bills are really emphasizing the run game, and maybe you're looking at a 1A, 1B James Cook, Ray Davis situation. Clapui comes in and says 550. I went with 556, and I came up with this number because once again I looked at Joe Brady's splits, and when Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator, Josh Allen had 229 passing attempts over 7 games. If you extrapolate that over a 17-game season, that's 556, 1.4 less per game than Ken Dorsey. So I would say 556 is a pretty safe number. It is lower than his season totals have been the last couple of years, 579, 567. It is significantly lower than 2021 when he had 646, but I still think that's a safe range for a top 2 quarterback in the National Football League, because you don't want to take the ball out of his hands too much. So I'm going to go with 556. I think that's a pretty safe number for Josh Allen. Last Josh Allen topic here. Per Sportsbook Review, Patrick Mahomes is the Vegas favorite to win the 2024 NFL MVP. Josh Allen is almost unanimously second choice. I think FanDuel had him third behind Joe Burrow. What are your thoughts on Josh Allen's MVP chances in the year 2024?
Well, there's a difference between putting up an MVP caliber season and actually winning the award.
That's literally my notes.
And I didn't look at the end of the day, like he's had MVP caliber seasons, and he's had seasons where maybe he justifiably should have been the MVP and didn't win. So I will say from an odds standpoint, like the odds aren't good that he's going to win. He would have to have a very special season in my mind, totally separate himself from the rest of the realistically quarterbacks, right? Because it's kind of become a quarterback award. AP, the last non-quarterback to win the MVP back when he ran for 2,000 yards off that ACL injury. But I digress. He's going to have to put up close to, I think, 50 touchdowns. And because whether or not it's right or wrong, the Bills are going to probably have to win 13 games and be close to being the number 1 seed in the AFC. I just think winning the division alone is probably not going to do it based on what we saw last year, even with good statistics, right? The Bills won a huge divisional game at the end of the season to get one of the top seeds in the AFC in the playoffs, Josh Allen being a huge reason for that. And they still gave the award to Lamar Jackson. So to me, I would say if he's in that 44 touchdown range that you kind of have predicted based on some of the averages, that's going to put him right in the mix. But it's also going to depend on what the Bills do as a team, even though that probably shouldn't be the deciding factor. It probably will be.
Yeah, you're spot on. Like I said, I expect him to get 40 plus touchdowns again. I expect the Buffalo Bills to hopefully win the AFC East again. But we did a records prediction show. And what was the record that both of us came up with? 11-6.
Yeah.
And 11-6 is not going to get you the AFC 1 or the 2 seed. And the voters have shown the last couple of years, if you're not a 1 or a 2 seed, you have no chance of winning the MVP award. So Josh Allen could literally be the best quarterback in football, but because the Buffalo Bills have a juggernaut of a schedule, and because he maybe throws 3 or 4 more interceptions than a typical quarterback does, just because of how reliant the offense is on him and how much of the offense is just literally dependent on Josh Allen, the national media is going to have a field day with the turnovers, right? The national media is going to have a field day with the fact that his team isn't a 1 or a 2 seed like maybe some other teams are. And he's going to have a very, very hard time winning the MVP award unless the team success comes along with, and I hate to say success too, right? Because we were a healthy linebacker away from being in the AFC Championship game last year with 11 wins, and winning your division is successful, right? So I don't know. I'm kind of, word vomiting here now because I'm just like so angry thinking about it. But
It's become jaded, right? I mean,
yeah.
the Coach of the Year award's even worse, right? You can have
Mhm.
sustained success like Belichick did and like McDermott's having now, and that means less than a team that was like not as good the year before and then becomes good. Like that's kind of how the Coach of the Year award has become as well.
Mhm.
So there's flaws to both of these awards, right? And as it is with the Pro Bowl, as it is with All Pro voting. All Pro voting to me is the last kind of somewhat sort of, I guess, reputable thing we've got at this
Mhm.
point, and even that's sort of still
I was
not
I was
not
looking to
perfect.
try to figure out who the all pro voters were, and they don't really list who the all pro voters were. They have to sort of out themselves. But I still do remember seeing the NFL MVP list of voters, and it was Chris Sims, Emmanuel Ako. I'm just like, I can't take this award seriously when a guy like Emmanuel Ako or a guy like Chris Sims or a guy like Mike Florio has a vote. Like I just cannot take the award seriously when those guys have a say. Like pretty disgusting that those guys, the National Football League gives them that kind of power because those guys are hot take artists. And you see Emmanuel Ako every single day spewing hot takes for attention. A lot of times he's using the Buffalo Bills as his sort of, dead horse that he wants to beat in order to get those views. So yeah, like I said, I'm a little angry, so I'm going to leave Justin Tyndall's comment up here to end the Josh Allen conversation. He says he expects Josh to be as motivated as ever to stick it to the national media and a certain Houston receiver, despite what they both say publicly. Don't think there's any love lost there. So once again, our expectations for Josh Allen is a big 2024 season. We're going to get into the target shares of receivers in a moment, but before that, we also mentioned the re-emphasis of the running game. So I want to talk about the expectations for the running back room. And right now it's James Cook, it's Ray Davis, and it's Ty Johnson. I'm actually going to take Ty Johnson sort of out of the equation here. And I just want to have a conversation about James Cook and Ray Davis, because I think Ty Johnson will be more of the RB3 in this offense, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. And he does have more of a role in the regular season, but James Cook, Ray Davis, do you think it's going to be RB1 James Cook, RB2 Ray Davis, or do you think it's going to be more of a 1A 1B situation like we saw in years previous with Singletary Cook, Singletary Moss, etc.?
I don't think it's gonna be a 1A, 1B, at least initially.
Mhm.
I think it's gonna be at least skewed more towards the splits we saw last year with James Cook getting in that he had 237 rushing attempts last year. I think you're gonna see him in that 225 to 250 range again this year. Latavius Murray had 79 rushing attempts last year. I think a bulk
Mhm.
of those would go to Ray Davis, 80 rushing attempts for him, maybe 80, maybe pushing closer to 100 potentially for him. So to me, it's still going to be at least a 2-to-1, maybe even closer to 3-to-1 ratio as far as attempts are concerned between James Cook and a guy like Ray Davis. So I would say no, not a 1A, 1B scenario as I'm predicting right now. I think it'll be a similar split to how we saw the running back split last year with maybe a
Mhm.
little bit of an uptick for Ray Davis.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you. I think it's going to be 1-2 to start. I think where you're going to see Ray Davis the most is short yardage situations, goal line situations, and as risky as it seems because he's a rookie, I think that Ray Davis is a considerably better pass protector than the two other guys in the room. It's one of the things that Brandon Beane pointed out in his post-draft press conference. He literally sat there and applauded Ray Davis's ability to pass block. Latavius Murray was the best pass blocker last year. It got him on the field even when fans really didn't want him on the field. Ty Johnson does an admirable job. James Cook struggles in pass pro. So really obvious passing downs, you could see a lot more Ray Davis maybe than you expect. And by season's end, if we do reemphasize the running game and run the ball more than we did last year, I honestly think maybe you could see a 1A, 1B develop between the two of these guys by midseason as the Bills sort of make their playoff push into the back half of the year, as the weather gets colder, as the conditions change. It would not shock me if at the end of the season we're like, whoa, the biggest difference maker on this offense this year was Ray Davis. Like, he put us over the top. He was the cherry on top. It really would not surprise me if by season's end that was a talking point.
I mean, I think if you're a Bills fan, you kind of are hopeful that that could happen, right? Because it's not anything that you want to take away from James Cook, but if you have two guys that you can consistently rely upon, that is a nice thing to have, right? I mean, Latavius Murray had his moments last year where he looked okay, but then kind of faded down the stretch. The Bills went with the Leonard Fournette experiment a little bit. Didn't work. Ty Johnson had good reps, but clearly the Bills didn't expect Ty Johnson to be a true like number 2, right? And that's why they drafted Ray Davis. So yes, by midseason, by season's end, if he's kind of elevated his game, he's contributing, like not taking away anything from James Cook, because I expect him to be kind of right in the same range of numbers that he had last year. We'll talk about that in a second, but it will be a nice outcome for the Bills if Ray Davis does contribute meaningfully offensively, right? And not just for pass protection.
Speaking of the number of carries, James Cook, 237 carries in 2023. Do you expect that number to go up or down for James Cook from 237?
I expect it to be right in that range again. In my notes, I said between 225 and 250. I think that's a sweet spot for him. You know, if 237, he was only 13 carries away from 250 carries, right? I mean, 250 carries, I don't think is an unreasonable expectation, but it's not going to shock me if he's slightly below that number. So I'd say, like, I don't think you want to give him a ton more than 250, maybe 260 carries if you really want to push it. But I think that, you know, that 230 to 250 range is a solid range for him, and that's probably where I would project him again this year.
If I were in charge, that's how many carries I would give him. But I'm actually going to say lower, and I'm going to explain my reasoning here. He had 117 carries in 7 games under Joe Brady. So extrapolate over 17 games, that's 284 carries. That's like way, way, way too many carries. I think the Buffalo Bills looked at their backup running backs this past season, who averaged 8.5 carries per game in all of 2023. And they're like, man, that's just really not good enough. They're not taking the pressure off James Cook the way we'd like to take the pressure off James Cook. I think that's why you saw Ray Davis drafted relatively high. And you also have Curtis Samuel who can come in and take some carries as well. So my expectation is more of like 200 to 215. I think it'll be down, but not down too much. I think the Buffalo Bills are going to want to keep James Cook more fresh this season. Joe Marino did a great podcast. I think it was the day that Stefon Diggs was traded. So he's mentioned a couple of times in some of those podcasts afterwards, hey, a lot of people didn't hear my breakdown of James Cook because Stefon Diggs got traded that day. Go back and listen. And in that podcast, I'm not going to read off the statistics verbatim because he is the one who went out and did that research. You can go listen to that podcast. But to summarize what Joe uncovered was that sort of after that big Dallas game and after the game after that, sort of James Cook kind of hit a wall and his yards per contact was down. His yards per carry were down. James Cook struggled into the playoffs for the Buffalo Bills, and he saw his averages decline significantly. So I think the Buffalo Bills want to take some pressure off of James Cook just so he can be more explosive. Like, he could have more yards rushing with less carries this year because he can be more explosive. He can have more all-purpose yards this year because if you take pressure off him in the run game, you know, he can go and he can catch the ball more. So I still think James Cook is going to be a major factor in this Buffalo Bills offense, even if his carries are down by 15 or 20, because he can contribute more in the passing game if he's fresher, and you can maybe see some more explosives when he's running the ball because he's got fresher legs. So I think Ray Davis is the key to unlocking an even more explosive James Cook.
I like that take. And then we got a super chat here from Justin
Mhm.
again. It says, just don't fumble Ray or as a
Not your
rookie,
first
otherwise
carry.
you'll be moving into dugouts. Yeah, as James Cook did famously. So, hey, and
The
in the
good
long
news for
run, it
Ray
worked out
Davis
for
is
him.
there's not as much competition as I think James Cook had in that
No.
Buffalo Bills backfield from a couple of years ago. The salary cap has left the options a little bit more limited. All right, let's get into the pass catcher expectations here. We
Mm.
have Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, James Cook, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Marquez Valdez Scantling, Mack Hollins. How would you order these guys in terms of the projected targets you expect them to see?
Yeah, so we got to start by going back to what we expected Josh Allen's
Mhm,
passing attempts to be, right? And you had it at 556. I think I'm going by kind of like the average of the last couple of years, 570, and 545 of those were actually like targetable balls. So start with that number for me, right around 550 is kind of where we're going. You
mhm,
have 241 targets of that 545 from last year out the door between Diggs and Davis. So you're talking about, you know, inching up to like that 40% range, 40% of those targets are out the door. Look, Kincaid had 91 targets a year ago as a rookie. I don't know if you would consider it a quiet 91 targets, but he was second on the team with those 91 targets. I expect him to be up in that sort of 115 to 120 range
mhm,
this year. I don't think he's going to all of a sudden become that 160 target guy that Stefon Diggs was. But if you put him at 120 targets out of 545 targetable balls, you're still talking about 22% of the target share from Josh Allen, which is notable, right? I mean, Stefon Diggs was outrageous with his 38% target share that he had. So I'm going to say Kincaid, he's going to be in that, 110 to 120 range would be my projection for him.
Yeah, Dalton Kincaid, I'm with you. I had 110, so I'm going off of 556
Yep.
targets that I had projected sort of earlier, extrapolated with what Josh Allen did with Joe Brady last year in those 7 games. I went with 110 because Evan Ingram led the league last year with 143. Kelsey led the league the year before that with 152. Mark Andrews led the year before that with 153. So there's a chance, really, that this number
Mm,
could be significantly higher for Dalton Kincaid. I think you're more likely to see that from Kincaid in year 3 or 4 than
yeah.
you would be in year 2. I still think that somewhere in the 110 to 120 range, I went with 110 is more accurate for a guy like Dalton Kincaid. Who do you think is going to have the sort of second highest total of receptions? Who do you think is going to be the second leading target receiver for the Buffalo Bills this season?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people probably are rooting for Khalil Shakir to be that guy, but
Yeah.
I don't see a scenario right now where it's not Curtis Samuel. And the
Yep.
reason I say that is because he was your biggest free agent signing you made, right? The 3 years, 30 plus
Mhm.
million. Um, Keon Coleman's a rookie, and so I think we do have to temper our expectations a bit with him. Um, Shakir is going to get an uptick. I'm not saying he's not, but I do think that you went out and made a concerted effort to bring in a guy like Curtis Samuel, who you can use all over the field, backfield, slot, wide, a lot of different areas where you can use him as your kind of maybe
Mhm.
better version of what you had with Emmanuel Sanders from a few years ago, to kind of be that guy to honestly, like, be the 1A or 1B with Kincaid, right? I do think he'll be the
Mhm.
1B, but I do expect Curtis Samuel to be pushing close to 90 targets like we saw from Kincaid as the number 2 option last year. So I'm gonna say Curtis Samuel will be in that 80 to 90 target range as the number 2 target getter.
Yeah, Eric K comes in and says the wide receiver dude on YouTube loves him. That's Matt Harmon from Reception Perception. Big fan of Curtis Samuel, specifically Curtis Samuel's separation stats. Right, so we have all these bigger bodied wide receivers joining the Buffalo Bills. Maybe Curtis Samuel is as that sort of natural separator. Him and Josh Allen gel, and when Josh Allen's in doubt, he goes and he looks Curtis Samuel's way. I have Curtis Samuel number 2 as well with
Mm.
85 targets. So who does that leave number 3 for you in terms of target share for the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, so number 3, you start kinda going down the list. I think, I think it's going to be a Khalil Shakir, but I think that it could be a dark horse. James Cook potentially
Yeah.
being the number 3. He's dark horse, but I'll say Khalil Shakir will be the number 3. I think he'll be in that 70 to 80 target range this year, which will be an uptick.
Mhm.
Obviously, that's a pretty sizable uptick from the 45 he had last year. So maybe conservatively, I'd say he'll have 70-ish targets this year.
Mhm.
But I do think that it will be a very close. I'll say this, right? We got Kincaid number 1, we got Samuel number 2. I think like it's the third guy is going to be like a 3A, 3B, 3C situation. Like
Mhm.
it's going to be Shakir, Coleman, Cook. I think those are the guys next in line. But I'll say Shakir, from just a pure number standpoint, will be the number 3.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's practically 2A, 2B because I have Kincaid with 110, I have Samuel with 85, and then I have Khalil Shakir number 3 with 80. So I think that between Samuel and between Shakir, you're going to see a good chunk of those wide receiver targets go to those two guys, especially with Dalton Kincaid taking that pressure off. So I expect a big because Khalil Shakir was the most reliable target, right? Like the most
Mhm.
efficient wide receiver in the National Football League last year. So if he just continues on the pace he continued on last year, he's going to catch 79 of those 80
Mm,
targets that are
exactly.
thrown to him. So I expect Khalil Shakir to have a nice year, but I don't expect him to push 100, 110 targets. I put it in the 80 range. I almost put James Cook number 4. I had James Cook number 4 and I changed it to Keon Coleman, who I have as my 4th with
Mhm.
65 targets in his rookie year. I actually think that might be a little bit high, but I don't know. I was feeling confident, and I'm giving Keon Coleman my number 4 spot with 65 targets. Who are you giving your number 4 spot to in terms of Buffalo Bills target share?
Well, so this is kind of like I don't know if you call it cheating, but I have Coleman and Cook each getting 60 as
Mhm.
my number 4. So I think 60 is a more than reasonable number for Keon Coleman as a rookie.
Mhm.
I mean, James Cook had 54 targets as a running back last
Yeah.
year. You said maybe using him in a more explosive way, 54 to 60. That's not even like a huge jump to think that's unreasonable for James Cook to get 60 targets. So
Mhm.
I have it. I have for ease of calculation and really projection as well. Coleman 60 and Cook 60 with my next 2.
Yeah, I had Cook at my number 5 with 60 targets. I had it reversed where I had Cook 65, and I had Coleman at 60, and I just kind of flipped it. So I expect Kincaid to be in a tier of his own. I expect Samuel and Shakir to be next, and then I think a guy like Coleman and I think Cook are going to be the two guys lumped together next. And that sort of brings into the equation, like, all right, who's going to be the next guy after this core group? Because
Mm,
Kincaid, Samuel, Shakir, Coleman, Cook, that seems like sort of the core group. Is it going to be a wild card like a Ray Davis? Is it going to be one of the two veteran receivers, Marquez Valdez Scantling, Mack Hollins? Is it going to be your number 2 tight end, who you're still paying a shit ton of money to in Dawson Knox? Who do you have as your 5th wide receiver in the target share? Or your 5th
like,
receiver in general in the target share.
yeah. So, I mean, like, I guess Cook, right? Because I have him in Coleman both at
Mhm.
60.
Oh, I'm
So,
sorry, the 6th spot.
yeah, 6th spot, I have Knox, Dawson
Mhm.
Knox. I think we're kind of forgetting about Dawson Knox, maybe
Agreed.
unfairly. 36 targets last year was low for him, only 22 catches. I think he's going to at least increase that by 10, get up to
Mhm.
46, and probably push
And he was
50
hurt a
plus.
ton too, yeah.
I mean, there's no reason Dawson Knox shouldn't get 50 targets.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, if the Bills want to like maximize the talent they have with their weapons, like Dawson Knox is a weapon, right? He's been a
Mhm.
weapon in the past. I know he's had some drops issues, but as a red zone guy, as a guy who's now become one of the most veteran guy to play with Josh Allen
Mhm.
now at this point, right? At this whole receiving group, he is the most veteran guy now to play with Josh Allen on this team as a receiver. So I feel like there should be an uptick in Dawson Knox's target share. You mentioned the injuries, but also just like he is talented. They are paying him quite a bit of money.
Mhm.
It can create again options for Joe Brady to have Kincaid and Knox available on the field, or even
Mhm.
just a mix and match depending on the situation and field position. So to me, Knox getting 50.
Yeah, I 50 might honestly be a baseline because it was
Yeah, it
36,
might be
and
more. It might be
that was
more.
dealing with the injury. I think
Yeah.
maybe we saw a sort of a mini preview of what these 2 guys are capable of working off each other in the wild card round when they each caught a touchdown against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Dawson Knox only had 1 catch for 9 yards in that game, whereas Dalton Kincaid had the bigger game with 3 catches, I think, for 59 yards. But it shows that you can get both of these guys involved. Both of these guys can be weapons, especially a guy like Dawson Knox in the red zone. So I set my baseline for him at 50. Who do we have below that? Like, how would you round out the rest of maybe these targets shares for the Buffalo Bills receiving core? I know we still haven't talked about MVS. We still haven't talked about Mack Hollins.
Yeah, so as of right now, I've got 455 targets soaked
Hmm.
up between my top 6, so that leaves me about another 100 to get me out back to
Hmm.
that, like, 555 number, 550 sort of targetable number. I don't know, it's hard for me to say. I would say, like, Mack Hollins, MVS maybe get about the
Hmm.
same amount of targets, 30, 35 targets apiece. Um But you also have to, like, go back and look at some of, like, who the Bills had last year. Trent Sherfield, only 22 targets. Deontay Hardy, only 21 targets. So
Hmm.
it's kinda hard to see them each getting, 35 maybe, but, these targets gotta go to somebody, and MVS could have a decent role, like, where he's getting 3, 4 targets a game down the field. Hollins, as a guy who's gonna play a lot probably on early downs as a
Hmm.
blocker, could get his chances as well. So 35 apiece for them, and maybe, 40 for the rest of the team, whether that's
Hmm.
Ray Davis or who knows. Like, I mean, someone mentioned Chase Claypool in the comments. I don't know, right? Like,
Yeah.
the field, as we've called it, on shows past, right, is gonna kind of
Mhm.
round out the number for me, about 40 going to the field, we'll say.
Yeah, you mentioned Sherfield and Hardy, so maybe I'm being generous here. MVS 35, Matt Collins 30, and then I left 41 for the field. That's Ray Davis, that's Quentin Morris, that's whoever wins the wide receiver 6 job, Ty Johnson, anyone who has to fill in because of injuries, etc. But who knows? Maybe Ray Davis could be the wild card here, right? Like maybe
Yep.
MVS and Hollins are in the 20s and like Ray Davis surprises and has like 40 targets in the passing game from the running back spot. So that wouldn't shock me as well. So that rounds out our running back target, our excuse me, our wide receiver targets. We had a comment here. What someone said, is MVS a roster lock? I'm not so sure. With that contract, I would assume the fact that Josh Allen is the one who lured him here. I would assume that MVS is as about as sure thing as a lock as you can get. A little foreshadowing, we're going to be doing our roster lock show next week, next Monday. So tune in for that. And Debbie Shark comes in and says, why not mention Chase Claypool? Supposedly he's been flashing in OTAs. No, the thing about Chase Claypool is I will talk about Chase Claypool when like it becomes a reality because it is promising that he has had success in the past. He was a high draft pick and he's doing well in OTAs, but players like Chase Claypool, as Aaron Quinn pointed out in our Cover One group chat, they're supposed to look good in shorts. It's when the pads come on that really matter. And if Chase Claypool can come in and blow up in the training camp and blow up in the preseason, he'll probably earn one of the wide receiver positions. But I think it's probably going to be a while before the Buffalo Bills coaching staff trusts him enough to trot him out there as one of our even top 4 receivers. I
Mhm.
find it hard to believe that he cracks even the top 5. So for Chase Claypool to make the roster, he better be gunning on special teams. He better be doing all the little things right because he's really fighting, in my opinion, for the 6 wide receiver role. And maybe he overcomes all those obstacles and wins the 6 receiver job. And then from there earns his way into the wide receiver rotation. But I think it's a much more uphill battle than simply, oh, he looked good in OTAs. He's going to be good for us in the regular season. I don't think it's as simple as maybe some people, some of the beat reporters have made it seem like it's going to be for Chase Claypool.
Yeah, and I mean, especially if the Bills only keep 6, right? You have to presume that, the top 4 are already set in stone, and that leaves 2 spots for guys like MBS, guys like Claypool, right? And so I don't know, man. It's just there's just not enough roster spots, I think, to confidently say that he's kind of there. Like, I think for now you have to put MVS over him based on the contract, but again, see how things play out in training camp.
All right. That will just about do it for us tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back Thursday with a live premiere at 9 p.m. In that live premiere, we're going to discuss Spencer Brown at length because he is the most notable Buffalo Bills impending free agent. So today we looked at the 2024 Buffalo Bills offense. Thursday, we're going to look ahead at the 2025 Buffalo Bills offense. Will Spencer Brown be a part of it? What other contract year players could possibly be or not be a part of this Buffalo Bills 2025 offense? And we're going to start to maybe think about some of the Buffalo Bills draft needs and free agent needs in 2025 as well. So we're going to look at today we looked at the present, our expectations for 2024. And on Thursday, we're going to look towards the future of the Buffalo Bills offense. But Dave, before we leave here, any final thoughts?
This is always a fun exercise we do in the summer because it like puts the real numbers against like what people are talking about, right? And you kind of start to see like there's a cap on what there can be, right? Like you can't have 100 targets to all these guys. So it is interesting. Kincaid, we all expect to be the kind of the top target guy. I hope that he does become that alpha target for Josh Allen, and then Keon Coleman, down the road becomes that big compliment. So we'll see. It's exciting.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Before you leave here, if you could smash that like. Remember, we are also a podcast, so you can listen in audio form by typing into any of your favorite podcasting platforms, Air Raid Buffalo. We'd really appreciate a comment in the comment section after this video is over, a review on our podcast network for our podcast, a 5-star and a review. We'd appreciate all those things. And then again, we want to try to grow this thing organically. So if you think that you know somebody who would love to sit here with us on a Monday night and talk some Buffalo Bills football, click that little share button, copy the link, text it to your friends, family, whomever. We want anyone and everyone to be a part of this Air Raid Hour experience here on the Cover One Sports Network. So thank you guys so much. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!